May the meditation of my heart and the words of my lips be pleasing to you, dear Lord. Amen. What are you doing here, Elijah? God asked Elijah that twice. What are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah's hiding in the wilderness. Picture this, he's all by himself, sitting under a solitary broom tree. God has just given him the power to defeat 450 false prophets in a fantastic fire-making feat. But now, Jezebel, the wife of the king, said he's going to be killed. So here he is under his solitary broom tree. He's terrified, he's alone, he's given up. So God sends an angel to wake him up and give him cake and water. He eats and he goes back to sleep. So the angel wakes him up again, gives him cake and water again. And that's enough to sustain him on a 40-day journey to Mount Horeb. And there he goes to sleep in a cave. And God asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So Elijah tells his story of woe, how he has stood up for God, he has struck down prophets, and now his life is threatened and he's alone. So Elijah's told to go stand on the mountain and wait for the Lord. And there is a great wind, a really great wind, a wind so strong it splits mountains and breaks rocks. And then there's an earthquake, and then there's a fire, and Elijah stays in the cave until there is the sound of sheer silence. And God says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah again tells his story of woe. He's struck down many prophets. Now his life is threatened and he's alone. And God says, "Go." God has a job for him to do. Elijah, who was ready to give up, becomes one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. And in the Gospel, Luke tells us how Jesus comes upon a man in the country of the Gerasenes who's possessed by a legion of demons. That's a whole lot of demons. He's put in shackles, but he's so tormented, he breaks his shackles. So Jesus sends the demons out of the man and into a herd of pigs, and they run down a cliff to their death, and the man remains. The crowd returns, and he's dressed, and he's sitting quietly, and he wants to go with Jesus. But Jesus says, "Go, tell others," because God has a job for him to do, just like God has a job for us to do. There's so much need in this world. There are so many people that need our help. Is God saying, "What are you doing here, people? Go." There's so much going on in the world that can sidetrack us into being complainers. I find myself getting caught up in conversations where we're just complaining about things that are going on in the world instead of talking about what we can do, what's something productive that we can do. I, like Elijah, saying, "Woe is me," instead of praying and looking to God for strength and direction. What are you doing here, Pat? So what can we do? June is Pride Month. Someone here brought that to my attention this week, saying, "Hey, June's almost over. We haven't done anything to support Pride Month. How can we support the Pride community?" Philip has mentioned a couple times that violence against LGBTQ population has been getting worse in Vancouver. I didn't know that. How can we show our support? Although Pride Month in Canada is June, Vancouver Pride Week is July the 25th to August the 3rd. So we have some time to think about how we celebrate their history and acknowledge their ongoing fight for equality. What can we do here, people? National Indigenous Peoples Day was yesterday. I didn't know that. That was brought to my attention when I went to ordinations yesterday at the cathedral. So how can we work to become allies with Indigenous people? What can we do to support truth and reconciliation? How can we as a church what can we as a church do so Indigenous people feel safe and welcomed in our church? Better yet, what can we learn from them? In one of the exercises we did in the Indigenous 101 series, I believe it was probably the blanket exercise, someone from this church asked the Indigenous people, how can we help you? And their response was, we don't need your help. That implies that they need help, that they are helpless. I guess we help them enough with colonization in residential schools. In our Indigenous 101 study, we gained wisdom from Indigenous teachers and writers, quiet wisdom and storytelling from Dr. Ray Eldred, and from the book we read by Richard Wagamese. And this week, something popped up on my iPad from Wob Canoe. I don't know why it did. I don't know where it came from. You may know who Wob Canoe is. I didn't. He has been the Premier of Manitoba since 2023, and he is the first Indigenous Premier in Canada. And what popped up was a video, and his message was that we are very privileged. We have a lot. Wob Canoe said, when you are in front of your Creator and he asks you what you did with all that he has given you, what will you say? What will I say? I have so much. I've had problems in my life, of course, but I've never lived in a place that was bombed. I've never been scared to walk on the street because my government shoots women on sight. I've never been ridiculed or threatened because of my gender or the gender of my partner. I have been blessed. I have extra. I have food, a home, safety and security. So Jesus may say, what are you doing here, Pat? Wob Canoe was part of a group mission with other Canadian premiers that traveled to Washington to strengthen the links between Canada and the US. And he said this, Canada will never be the 51st state, but can be your #1 friend. We fought in world wars together. We defeated fascism and communism. We stand up for democracy. We've answered the call on fentanyl and on the border. We don't want tariffs because we're so close, it'll only raise prices for all of us. We're a nation of hockey players. We know how to stand up for ourselves. At the same time, we know how to go for a beer together once the game is over. The winds of change can blow through politics, but they'll never change geography. We will always be neighbors. We should always be friends. What are you doing here, Wob? Good things. He's focused on friendship between US and Canada, not their differences. I remember when a colleague of mine told me when we were working with refugee families, don't get in the pit with them. People would come into our office and tell us how they talk to their families who are struggling in other countries, and they cry and cry on the phone with them. And my colleague said, stop crying, or stop talking to them so often. If you're going to crawl into the pit and cry with them, what good is that doing? Why don't you stay out of the pit and pull them out? I thought that was harsh. But one day a woman came in asking for money and sponsorship for her son, who was in his early 20s and a refugee in another country. She was barely understandable because she was crying through the conversation. And my colleague said, stop crying. Your crying will not help your son. If we had money to give people, we'd have a lineup down the block. We don't have money. You need to work and get money to bring your son to Canada. And I was taken aback by her cruelty. But a few weeks later, that mom came back to the office. She had a job, and she showed us that she and another son that was in Canada had started saving money to sponsor her son. She was empowered by my colleague's comments, and we started the application process. So crying doesn't help us help others. Complaining doesn't help us help others. Don't get in the pit with them. What are we doing here? Let's focus on what we as a church can do. How do we reach out to others? We have many ministries here, but many of us have been busy with the renovation, and that's pretty well done now. So could we do more, something big? What are we doing here? Elijah wanted to die. He wanted to quit. God said, no, 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 no. Refocus. I have work for you to do. The man who Jesus released from demons wanted to go with Jesus. Jesus said, no, 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 no. Refocus. You need to go spread the word. Is there something that God is calling you to do, or something God is calling us as a church to do? Sometimes we can lend a hand, but sometimes all we can do is pray. God spoke to Elijah in sheer silence. Life today is a bit of a storm, a bit of an earthquake, and there are always fires to put out. In this busy world, how much time do we take to be silent and sit with God? We need his help and guidance to determine if we can jump into action or if we provide comfort, or perhaps others are called to help. Let us find the time to be silent. Let us find the time to pray for strength and direction. So get out from under your broom tree, eat some cake, have a glass of water, because God has things for you to do. Amen.